Judge Greg Mathis believed he had witnessed it all in his 25 years on television. The 64-year-old TV judge, renowned for his tough love style and street-smart insight, was about to encounter his match in a completely unexpected way. The moment Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stepped into his courtroom, everything we thought we knew about these two powerful figures shifted. It all began with laughter. Judge Mathis literally laughed out loud when he first heard the case being presented to him. But Jasmine Crockett's next words didn't just stop the laughter. They turned the entire courtroom upside down, leaving one of America's most confident judges utterly speechless. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that like button if you want to see what happens when political influence meets courtroom authority. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss these jaw-dropping moments. This wasn't just another normal day in Judge Mathis's courtroom. This was the day a rising political force faced off with a television legend, and the outcome stunned everyone watching. To truly understand why this clash was so explosive, you first need to know exactly who these two forces are and why their confrontation seemed destined. Judge Greg Mathis has been a household name for over 20 years. The former Detroit street kid turned judge built his career on being the firm, no-nonsense voice of reason. His TV show Judge Mathis has been on air since 1999, making him one of the longest-running TV judges ever. At 64, Mathis has presided over thousands of cases, met every kind of person imaginable, and earned a reputation for being unshakable. He's famous for his quick wit, sharp ability to detect lies, and that unmistakable laugh, a laugh that can either put you at ease or warn you that a tough lesson is coming. Growing up in Detroit's Herman Gardens housing project, Mathis was involved with gangs as a teenager before turning his life around to become a judge, author, and television figure. He takes pride in his street credibility and in connecting with everyday people. In his courtroom, laughter usually means someone's about to learn a hard truth. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett represents a completely different type of influence. At 43, she's one of the Democratic Party's fastest-rising names, representing Texas's 30th congressional district. A lawyer turned politician, Crockett gained national attention for her fierce debates and her refusal to back down from anyone, no matter their power. Raised in St. Louis, she worked her way through law school and built a career defending those who couldn't defend themselves. She's known for her sharp tongue, deep legal expertise, and an ability to turn attacks into wins. When she speaks, people listen, and when challenged, she doesn't just push back, she takes control. This encounter wasn't supposed to be a fair match. Judge Mathis, in his own courtroom with decades of experience handling tough personalities, seemed to hold all the advantages. Crockett was stepping into his world, where he makes the rules. But what no one anticipated was that she had no intention of playing by his rules. She came ready to change them completely. The case that brought them together appeared simple, a civil dispute over a failed community development project. But beneath that straightforward surface was a deeper fight over power, respect, and the true right to speak for the people. Mathis assumed he was facing yet another politician who would falter under his legendary courtroom presence. Crockett saw an opening to prove that the old way of doing things was about to be challenged. The morning began like any typical day in Judge Mathis's Detroit courtroom. The theme music played, the audience took their seats, and Mathis entered with his trademark confidence. He greeted the crowd with a warm smile, cracked a few jokes to loosen them up, and prepared for what he expected to be another routine hearing. Today, we have a case involving a community development dispute, Mathis announced, scanning his paperwork. The plaintiff is Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, here on behalf of residents in the Elmwood community of Dallas, Texas. That's when the first surprise landed. As Crockett entered, she didn't resemble the typical participant on Judge Mathis. Wearing a sharp navy suit, she carried herself with the authority of someone used to leading, and she was flanked by a small team carrying boxes of evidence. Mathis arched an eyebrow. Well, we've got ourselves a real live Congresswoman in the house today, he remarked, prompting laughter from the audience. Hope you're ready for some real justice, not that political theater from Washington. Crockett smiled but stayed silent, calmly arranging her materials. The defendant was a major development firm accused of promising affordable housing for a Dallas neighborhood, but instead using the funds to build luxury condos far beyond residents' means. The company's lawyer, looking uneasy in his pricey suit, clearly wished he was elsewhere. Mathis reviewed the case and began with his signature approach. Congresswoman Crockett, I see you're here fighting for your people, admirable. But this is my courtroom, not Congress. Here, we deal in facts, not political speeches. Can you handle that? The audience laughed, expecting her to flinch. Instead, she rose and replied calmly, Your Honor, I've been dealing in facts my entire career, both as a lawyer and as an elected representative. I'm ready whenever you are. Something in her voice made Mathis study her more closely. This wasn't going to be easy. All right then, he said, leaning back. Tell me why you think this company owes your people anything. They signed a contract, right? Contracts are binding, even in Texas. Opening her first box of documents, Crockett responded, Your Honor, they did sign a contract, and in that agreement, they committed to build 200 units of affordable housing at rents no higher than $800 per month. Instead, they built condos starting at $2,500. But they built housing, Mathis interrupted. That's what the contract says. Build housing. Maybe your people should have been more specific. Here's where things heated up. Mathis was applying his usual tactic, testing the plaintiff's grasp of their case, but with a faint air of dismissiveness, as though assuming she was just another grandstanding politician. Crockett didn't budge. Your Honor, the contract clearly defined affordable housing using HUD guidelines for the area. These guidelines are federal law. The defendants knew exactly what they were agreeing to. Federal law, Mathis chuckled, delivering his famous laugh, the one that usually precedes a verbal lesson. Well, Congresswoman, you might make federal laws, but in my courtroom, we use common sense. And common sense says if these people didn't read their contract closely, that's their problem. The audience burst into laughter again, and a few people could be seen nodding in agreement. Judge Mathis was clearly appealing to his core supporters, those who believed strongly in personal responsibility and had little tolerance for what they considered government interference. But Crockett had been waiting for exactly this moment. She reached for a thick folder and placed it firmly on the podium. Your Honor, I know you value common sense. Let me show you what common sense looks like when it's backed by the law, she said. Opening the folder, she began revealing enlarged photographs on an easel her team had arranged beforehand. The images displayed the original neighborhood working families, elderly residents, and children playing in small but neatly kept yards. These are the people who lived in the Elmwood community. Crockett continued. Mrs. Sarah Johnson, 67 years old, lived here for 3 decades. She worked 2 jobs to keep her house and raise her grandchildren after her daughter passed away. When the developers arrived, they promised she could remain in the new development. Judge Mathis still looked doubtful, but it was clear he was starting to pay closer attention. Crockett turned to the next photograph, now showing the same location transformed into gleaming luxury condominiums, guarded by security gates with BMWs parked in the driveways. This is what they built instead. Mrs. Johnson now lives in a shelter because she cannot afford $500 a month. That's unfortunate, Judge Mathis replied. But business is business. If the contract had loopholes, there were no loopholes. Crockett interrupted firmly. There was fraud. The word fraud lingered in the air like a challenge. Judge Mathis straightened in his chair. Fraud was a serious accusation that demanded serious proof. That's a strong claim, Congresswoman, he said, his tone more stern now. You'd better be prepared to back it up. I am, Crockett answered without hesitation. She produced another set of papers. These are internal emails from the development company, obtained during legal discovery. In these messages, the executives joke about tricking the locals and admit they never intended to build anything affordable. Judge Mathis was no longer smiling. He took the documents and began to read, his expression shifting from doubtful to surprised to genuinely outraged. Mr. Patterson, he addressed the company's lawyer. Did your clients actually write that these people are too stupid to know what affordable housing means? The lawyer looked as if he wanted to vanish. Your Honor, that email was taken out of context. Judge Mathis's voice rose. The context is crystal clear. Your clients took money from a community development fund, promised affordable housing, then built condos the locals could never pay for and laughed about it. But Crockett wasn't finished. She could tell the judge was beginning to grasp the seriousness of the case, but she wanted him to see the bigger picture. Your Honor, this isn't just one Dallas neighborhood. This is part of a nationwide pattern. Developers targeting low-income areas, making promises of improvement, and then pricing out the very people they claimed they'd help. Judge Mathis's eyes narrowed. Are you trying to turn my courtroom into a political stage, Congresswoman? This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, Judge Mathis openly challenging her, implying she was just another politician using his show for her own goals. The audience leaned forward, expecting her to retreat or grow defensive. Instead, Crockett smiled. "No, Your Honor," she said calmly. "I'm trying to turn your courtroom into a place where justice actually happens." The room fell, completely silent. This wasn't just an answer, it was a direct challenge to his authority, suggesting that justice wasn't already happening in his courtroom. Judge Mathis studied her for a long moment, his thoughts clearly churning. Was this young congresswoman really daring to challenge him here? "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Crockett stood her ground. "Your Honor, you've built your career on protecting those who can't protect themselves. You've spoken about growing up in the projects, about knowing what it's like to have nothing. But when I give you evidence of a company stealing from people just like those you grew up with, your first reaction is to blame the victims." The tension was thick enough to slice. Judge Mathis had been challenged before, but never like this, never by someone attacking not just his ruling, but his entire approach. "Congresswoman," he said slowly, "you're walking a very thin line here." "No, Your Honor," Crockett replied. "I'm standing exactly where I need to stand, on the side of justice." What followed was unlike anything the courtroom had ever witnessed. Judge Mathis, who had commanded his courtroom for more than 2 decades, was now facing a legal mind as sharp as his own, perhaps even sharper. He leaned forward, still wearing his trademark confidence, but now visibly unsettled by her bold defiance. "Congresswoman, you think you can walk into my courtroom and lecture me on justice? Let me remind you where you are." "I know exactly where I am," Crockett shot back instantly. "I'm in a courtroom where a judge is about to decide whether a company that committed fraud against poor people will be held accountable. The question is, do you?" The audience gasped. Nobody ever spoke to Judge Mathis that way, but Crockett wasn't stopping. She stepped closer to the bench, carrying another box of evidence. "Your Honor, you wanted facts. Let me give you facts that will blow your mind." She took out a laptop and hooked it up to the courtroom's display system. "These are bank statements," she said, showing that the defendants collected $12 million in federal community development funds specifically meant for affordable housing. The screen lit up with detailed financial entries, and Crockett began guiding the judge through them with the ease of the seasoned attorney she was. "They accepted this money, taxpayer money, Your Honor, and instead of investing it in affordable housing, they spent it on luxury materials for condos the poor could never hope to buy. They didn't just break a contract, they stole from the federal government." Judge Mathis was now leaning in, his earlier doubt giving way to real interest in the legal specifics. "And more than that," Crockett continued, "when residents raised concerns, the company brought in a law firm to scare them into silence. Elderly residents were threatened with lawsuits they could never afford. Single mothers were told they might lose their children if they kept speaking out." She produced recorded phone conversations. "These are actual recordings of those threats. Your Honor, would you like to hear them?" Judge Mathis gave a grim nod. Crockett played an audio clip of a company representative telling an elderly woman she would regret causing trouble if she didn't stop asking about the housing project. The room fell utterly still as the cruel voice echoed. Even Judge Mathis looked genuinely angry. "Your Honor," Crockett said, her voice tightening with conviction, "you want to talk about common sense. Common sense says that when the powerful rob the powerless, someone must stand up and fight back. That's why I'm here." Then she did something no one foresaw. She stepped away from the evidence and faced Judge Mathis directly. "Judge Mathis, I've been watching your show for years. I've seen you defend people who remind you of where you came from. You've helped single mothers get child support. You've made deadbeat fathers take responsibility. You've given young people second chances because you remember when someone gave you one." Mathis's guarded body language softened slightly, but somewhere along the way, she pressed on. "You started forgetting that the worst bullies aren't the small-time con artists you see on your program. The worst bullies have expensive lawyers and corporate offices, and they steal millions from whole neighborhoods." She gestured toward the defense table, where the company's attorney shifted uncomfortably. "This company didn't only hurt Mrs. Johnson and her neighbors. They harmed every person who believes that hard work and following the rules lead to fair treatment. They harmed every community that puts its trust in developers. And they harmed every judge who believes in justice." Judge Mathis lowered his papers, a new respect in his eyes. "Go on," he murmured. "Your Honor, you laughed when I walked in here because you thought I was just another politician chasing attention. But I'm not here as a congresswoman. I'm here as a lawyer standing for people who can't stand for themselves just like you once did. Before fame, the courtroom held its breath. You want to know the difference between politics and justice? Politics is making people feel good with empty promises. Justice is forcing the powerful to keep the promises they've already made. She walked back to her table and picked up one last sheet. This is a promissory note signed by the defendants, promising that every displaced resident would get either comparable housing or financial compensation. They signed it, Your Honor. They gave their word. Mathis examined the document. His face shifted from doubt to surprise to clear admiration for Crockett's thorough preparation. How many families were displaced? He asked. 67. She replied without hesitation. 67 families who believed these people would keep their word. And how many have received what was promised? None, Your Honor. Not a single one. Mathis set the paper down and looked to the defense lawyer. Mr. Patterson, I hope you've got one hell of an explanation. The lawyer stood nervously. Your Honor, the company has gone through financial difficulties. Financial difficulties? Mathis's tone climbed. They took $12 million in federal money and built luxury condos. But they're in financial trouble? Well, market conditions changed. Patterson tried. The market conditions? Mathis's anger was now unmistakable. Mr. Patterson, do you think I'm an idiot? That's when Crockett delivered the knockout blow. Your Honor, she said evenly, there's one more thing about those market conditions. She held up her phone and opened a real estate listing. The company is renting these condos for $3,200 a month. They're fully occupied with a waiting list. This company isn't struggling, they're thriving. They just refuse to honor their promises to the poor. Mathis studied the phone screen for a long moment. Then his gaze met Crockett's with something close to admiration. Congresswoman, he said slowly, you didn't just bring me a case, you brought me a mission. Yes, Your Honor, I did, she said, standing tall. And that mission is to prove that justice isn't about politics, fame, or popularity. Justice is about making the powerful keep their promises to the powerless. And when they don't, someone must make them pay. Mathis leaned back, silent for several long seconds. The courtroom was so still that every breath was audible. Finally, he spoke. Mr. Patterson, your clients are in very serious trouble. And Congresswoman Crockett, you just reminded me why I became a judge in the first place. He faced the camera, his expression unusually stern, something the audience had rarely witnessed before. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes you believe you understand a person completely, and then they surprise you. He began. I assumed I was dealing with a politician chasing television exposure, but instead, I'm looking at a lawyer who just taught me a lesson in my own courtroom. The crowd broke into loud applause, but Judge Mathis lifted his hand to quiet them. More importantly, he continued, she reminded me that the law isn't about acting tough for the cameras. It's about standing strong for the people who truly need someone to fight for them. He turned directly toward Crockett. Congresswoman, you win, your clients win, and honestly, we all win when lawyers like you refuse to let companies like this steal from communities. The moment Judge Mathis delivered his decision, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't just a victory for the 67 families in Dallas finally about to receive justice. It reshaped how the nation saw both Judge Mathis and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Not only did Mathis rule in favor of the displaced residents, he went further than anyone had imagined, ordering the development company to pay $2 million in damages, issue housing vouchers for all displaced families, and cover their legal fees. Then came the move no one expected. Furthermore, Judge Mathis declared, I am referring this case to the FBI for a potential federal fraud investigation. When companies steal federal funds meant for low-income communities, that's not just a civil matter, it's a crime. The defense attorney's face drained of color. They had anticipated a standard TV courtroom settlement. Instead, they were staring down possible federal criminal charges, rather than basking in her win. Crockett used her time on camera to send a broader message. This isn't about me winning or Judge Mathis losing, she said. This is about what happens when principled people work together instead of tearing each other down. The judge didn't change his mind because I argued harder. He changed it because the evidence was undeniable, and he had the integrity to follow it, wherever it led. Looking squarely at Mathis, she added, Your Honor, you reminded me today why I became a lawyer, not to score political points, but to fight for those who need someone in their corner. After filming, Mathis did something rare. He admitted he had learned something. "I've been doing this for 25 years," he told the cameras in a post-show interview. "I thought I'd seen every kind of lawyer, every type of case, every kind of person. But Congresswoman Crockett showed me you can be tough without being cynical, political without being fake." He paused, smiling, not his signature TV grin, but a real expression of respect. "She came into my courtroom and made me a better judge. That doesn't happen often." Within hours, Crockett versus Mathis was trending nationwide. Unlike most viral moments that split audiences along political lines, this one seemed to unite them. Conservative viewers who rarely supported Democratic politicians praised Crockett's skill and preparation. "I don't agree with her politics," one Twitter user wrote, "but damn, she can argue a case." Liberal viewers who had sometimes dismissed Mathis as old-fashioned applauded his willingness to change his stance when faced with solid facts. "This is what happens when you listen to evidence, not just opinion," another user posted. One of the most shared memes featured Mathis's shocked expression with the caption, "When you realize the politician actually knows what she's talking about." Major news networks struggled to categorize the story. Was it politics, entertainment, or legal news? CNN highlighted Crockett's legal expertise and rising influence in Congress. This appearance showed a different side of her, not just the fiery lawmaker in hearings, but the capable lawyer who earned that role. Fox News, unexpectedly, praised both figures for disagreeing respectfully while finding fact-based common ground. MSNBC spotlighted the housing justice issue, pointing out that this case mirrored countless situations nationwide where developers promise affordable housing but deliver gentrification instead. But the most meaningful outcome was in Dallas. The 67 displaced families didn't just receive financial compensation, they regained their dignity. Mrs. Sarah Johnson, the 67-year-old grandmother Crockett had mentioned during her argument, told local reporters through tears, "I never thought anyone important would listen to folks like us, but that Congresswoman made them listen." The FBI investigation Mathis initiated led to criminal charges against 3 company executives and uncovered similar fraud schemes in 12 other cities. Back in Washington, Crockett's bipartisan praise shocked many. "Jasmine proved you can be a strong progressive and still earn respect from people who see the world differently," a Democratic colleague remarked. "She didn't compromise her beliefs. She showed that those beliefs produce real results." Even some Republicans admitted admiration. "I disagree with her on almost everything," one said, "but you can't deny those results. She came prepared and got justice for her people." The experience also shifted Mathis's approach to his show. In later episodes, he dedicated more time to legal substance and less to theatrics. "That Congresswoman reminded me that real lives depend on what happens here," he told his producers. He began highlighting more housing and community development cases, using his platform to educate viewers on these issues. Perhaps the most valuable takeaway was the example set for political engagement. In an era of endless shouting matches, Mathis and Crockett proved you can disagree, challenge each other, and still earn mutual respect. They didn't align on everything, a political analyst noted, but they agreed on the most important thing: justice should be rooted in facts, not politics. Behind the scenes, Crockett's preparation had been meticulous, according to her staff. She spent 3 weeks readying herself. Aware of Mathis's reputation for intimidating politicians, she knew she was walking into the lion's den. A staffer explained. Her team reviewed dozens of past episodes, dissected his tactics, and prepared airtight responses to every possible challenge. They anticipated he would try to dismiss her as just another grandstanding lawmaker, so they ensured every shred of evidence was rock solid. "We had backup proof for our backup proof," joked one of her legal advisors. Jasmine was set on making sure that if Judge Mathis rejected her case, it would be because he disagreed with the law, not because she had failed to prepare. Meanwhile, Judge Mathis's production crew had no idea what was about to unfold. "We thought this was going to be a normal politician visit," said one producer. "You know, they show up, make a few speeches, push their agenda, and we get some good TV moments. We never expected her to bring solid proof and turn it into a genuine legal hearing." The exact moment Judge Mathis realized this was something extraordinary was when Crockett revealed the recorded phone calls. According to people watching in court, his entire expression changed instantly. That was when Mathis stopped putting on a show for the cameras and started acting like a real judge. One legal analyst who reviewed the footage noted, "The TV personality disappeared. and you could see the old Detroit street lawyer who truly cared about justice. The phone recordings were especially damaging because they captured company officials, not only breaking promises but also mocking them. In one call, the company executive told an elderly resident, "What are you going to do about it? Sue us with what money?" When that recording played, Judge Mathis's face showed true anger, not the staged outbursts he sometimes uses for television, but genuine fury at the cruelty of the powerful taking advantage of the powerless. While Congresswoman Crockett was carefully assembling her case, the defense side was crumbling behind closed doors. The company's attorney, Mr. Patterson, had been assured by his clients that this was simply a PR issue that could be smoothed over with legal loopholes. "They told me it was just a simple contract matter," Patterson later confessed to fellow lawyers. "They never mentioned the federal fraud, the recorded threats, or the fact that they had been deceiving everyone for 2 years." As Crockett rolled out piece after piece of proof, Patterson was seen desperately texting his clients, trying to get permission to propose a settlement, but it was already too late. Judge Mathis was fully in investigative mode, and Crockett was set on placing everything on the record. "You could see the fear in their faces," said one person in the audience. "They walked in expecting a friendly TV spot and ended up in a real trial with real stakes." One of the most fascinating parts was watching the live audience's reaction shift during the taping. At first, there was laughter and casual interest, but as Crockett shared her evidence and told stories of families forced from their homes, the mood shifted to genuine concern. When the recorded calls played, there were audible gasps and whispers of "Oh my God." It felt like watching a room full of people suddenly realized they were witnessing something important, recalled an audience member. "We came to be entertained, but we walked away informed about serious problems affecting real people." The standing ovation Crockett received at the end wasn't the polite applause that's normal for TV shows. It was heartfelt gratitude for someone fighting for those who couldn't defend themselves. The episode was soon required viewing at multiple law schools as an example of outstanding courtroom preparation and advocacy. Harvard Law's Professor Jana Morrison even added it to her trial advocacy course. Congresswoman Crockett proved that effective legal argument isn't about being loud or dramatic. It's about being prepared and letting the proof tell the story. Students were impressed with how Crockett maintained respect for Judge Mathis. Even when challenging him, she never insulted him, noted one law student. She questioned his reasoning but respected his role. That's incredibly hard, especially when you feel dismissed. Political scholars were equally intrigued, calling it a masterclass in how elected leaders can use media appearances for actual policy progress instead of just self-promotion. Dr. Michael Chen of Georgetown University even wrote an entire paper on the episode. Crockett accomplished something rare. She used entertainment media to advance a serious policy cause without sacrificing either the message or the entertainment value. Chen wrote, "The secret, according to him, was that Crockett never lost sight of the fact that she was representing real people with real struggles, not just herself or her party." Perhaps the biggest surprise was the genuine friendship that grew between Mathis and Crockett. Afterward, they began working together on housing justice issues, Mathis offering insight on personal impacts, Crockett sharing policy solutions. "Greg can cut through political nonsense and focus on what actually helps people," Crockett later said, "and I think I helped him see that individual cases can be part of bigger systemic issues that require policy change." Mathis started featuring more housing justice cases on his show, often consulting with Crockett's office to understand the complex legal aspects. "Jasmine taught me that being tough on individuals isn't enough if the system itself is unfair," he explained. The episode sparked a nationwide discussion on housing fraud and led to the creation of the National Housing Justice Coalition, co-led by Mathis and Crockett. What began as one case in Dallas became a blueprint for fighting housing fraud nationwide, said coalition coordinator Maria Rodriguez. The group has since uncovered similar cases in 47 states, used Crockett's strategies to fight back, recovered over $50 million for displaced families, and helped pass federal laws increasing penalties for housing fraud. The success also inspired other unexpected partnerships between media personalities and politicians, focused on real solutions instead of political theater. Known as the Mathis-Crockett model, it showed that Americans want substance over spectacle, solutions over slogans. Months later, when asked about the most memorable case of his career, Mathis didn't hesitate. Congresswoman Crockett versus the housing developers. Not because it was dramatic though it was, but because it reminded me the law should serve justice, not entertainment. She made me a better judge, and I hope I helped her become an even better lawyer. For Crockett, the experience became a guide for all her work. Don't just argue, prove your case with facts no one can ignore. She tells young lawyers and politicians, that's how you change minds and change lives. The story of Mathis and Crockett became more than just a viral clip. It became proof that Americans can disagree without being hostile, that politics can solve problems instead of create them, and that justice can win when principled people work together. In a nation often divided, their clash turned collaboration gave people hope that maybe, just maybe, differences can make us stronger.